Hey everybody, I am ARMR, and what I watched today is Reboot, Season 1, Episode 1, The Tearing. Yep, Avatar is done, and we're starting a new series. I've got my icon ready, so let's dive right in. The opening of this show always gets me smiling, from when I was a kid and now. Some might point out that this is an earlier example of the splainy title trend that I mentioned previously, but this one I feel works better than the ones we're getting today because it doesn't just give us the quick synopsis of what the series is. It also gives us a theme song, a really great high energy track that gets us pumped for the episode to come. And even though this is the first episode, it starts off great. We start off with a high energy chase scene as Heck and Slash attempt to chase down Bob, thinking him trapped. Like the comedy sidekicks they are, Bob simply moves forward a couple feet, and the goons smash into each other. And the first thing I thought about this was the animation of this show is still beautiful. Considering that it was one of the first of its kind, a completely computer-generated show, it still looks awesome. It was a Canadian production, and I just love it. It looks great, and it still holds up today. A moment later, we get our first introduction to Megabyte, and the skill of the writing in this episode shows, as it only takes 2 lines of dialogue. Him saying, I'm only asking for a favor, and Bob calling him Slime, and we get a good idea of who he is and what their relationship is. He's your typical sleazy bad guy, going like, oh, I'm just asking for a favor. And Bob's like, no, you're evil. I'm not going to do something for you. Megabyte delivers a vague threat, and then we transition a little jarringly to Bob being woken up by his alarm clock. The previous sequence, I'm guessing, happened like the day before or something like that. But anyway, that is one complaint I can have about this episode, is that particular transition felt a little jarring. In a cool sequence here, Bob's bed ejects him, and we get a little bit of life inside a computer here, as a track takes him through a shower, and a hairdryer gives him a interesting hairdo, before it slams him straight into a vid window that pops up, Enzo declaring that there is an emergency down at the diner. So, we transition immediately to a staple of the show, a place that we are going to see in many episodes, Dot's Diner. It's signed as akimbo. There's a couple tables out on the front parking lot. It's just a mess. Bob is about to step through the door, but he finds Frisket there, just snoozing away. So he goes around the side and climbs in the window. And Bob's little hoverboard thing gets tossed in behind him, just chewed all the hell, because apparently Frisket is in that chewing phase. No sooner do Bob's boots hit the floor than we get our first in the pixels sight of Enzo, as he just tackle hugs Bob, being like, "Bob's here!" Enzo is, at least at this point in the series, since we're at the very beginning, Bob's total fanboy. He worships the guy. Enzo then proceeds to spout a whole lot of computer terms and words that sum up to a bunch of goons showed up and trashed the place. So Megabyte made good on the threat he made earlier. He basically gave a vague threat about, oh well, if you don't help me, it will cause trouble for your friends, and here we go, typical mafia kind of thing, trash the place and go, if you don't want this to happen again, you better help me, and that's exactly what Megabyte does. Bob, at this point he guesses, it's like, well, it has to be Megabyte, but he does the typical hero thing. He's like, it's my problem, I'll fix it. But Dot reminds him it's not just him here, and she can't keep dealing with the cost of her restaurant being down. He should let them help him. After all, this is Mainframe, and everyone sticks together. Bob may be a guardian, but he doesn't have to fight alone anymore. He tells them what Megabyte wants, a little favor, but he hasn't said what it is. And the characters around him bring up a good point. There's one guy who's saying, well, why not just do it? But Dot refuses. They all know Megabyte's no good. He's a villain, and this speaks to an idea often brought up in media, that if you do one favor for a villain, it will easily lead to more. or turn out to be far less innocent than you were led to believe. It's kind of that rabbit hole thing, you know, you give a mouse a cookie and where does it lead? According to some versions, the entire planet being blown up, but that's a pretty weird progression on that one. And this helps steel Bob's resolve, with him declaring that, you know, he'll stay right there at the diner to ensure that Megabyte can't cause any more trouble. Enzo, the hero-worshipping kid that he is, begs to help Bob. He wants to stay there and just be right at Bob's side and help out. Naturally, he walks right into a wild trope as he starts slagging Megabyte, only to find a vid window of Megabyte listening to his every word behind him. I love the attention to detail here, as the top bar of the window states that it is a double-sided vid window, and indeed, the image is available to both Dot and Bob on both sides of the window. But it's just a nice little touch having that description at the top there, like an actual computer window. Megabyte repeats his request and threat, with Bob declaring he'll protect the diner. Unfortunately, this is where we get that sound. An ominous ringing, as the skies turn purple, and a cold voice declares, "Warning, incoming game." That's right. Here we're shown one of the big set pieces of this series, and my most loved, the games. Bob rushes towards the game to help, but Megabyte sends out his minions, deciding to blackmail Bob until Bob does what he wants. He basically declares that there will be no more games for Bob. And without Bob, the mainframers are really, they're not very good at games. They apparently lose quite badly in this one, too. And yeah, when you lose in a game in this series, you get nullified. You get turned into this, data worm that's, it's basically just a collection of what's left of your data after you get destroyed. And when a game is lost, when the user inputs a game and wins, every sprite that is in the game dies. And that's what happens here. Megabyte's forces stop Bob from getting into the game, and as a result, the user wins. You can see from our hero's reactions just how devastating this outcome really is. An entire sector of their hard drive has been nullified. It also raises a philosophical question about the series, that kind of thing, where if every game the user wins, and in this case the user is us, those people outside the computers, playing around on the net. Every time we win, an entire sector of their people dies because some unknown being wanted to play a game. If you look at it from that perspective, I can imagine how terrifying these games are for our main characters. For us, they're fun little distractions, but for the residents of Mainframe, they are life and death. Makes me feel a little bad about playing on easy mode sometimes, huh? Anyway, so basically, yeah, Megabyte just murdered an entire sector just to get to Bob. So if Bob had been in there to help, it's implied that the game would have been won for them. Bob goes to seek advice from the leader of Mainframe, the wise old Fong, who makes Bob play Pong in order to earn his advice, basically to prove himself worthy. Bob, of course, wins and asks Fong what he thinks about the situation. Fong gives him the same advice that everyone else did, that Megabyte is a very tenacious virus, and you should not, try to bargain with him or whatnot. You should refuse him. In a kind of funny moment, he's like, there is an old README file that says, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I do love how the show creatively mixes computer terminology in with just regular phrases and whatnot. And it is just really funny to have this whole, it's not an old saying, it's an old README file. Fong ends his advice by telling Bob not to be rash or work alone. But of course, we see Bob next scene zooming into Megabyte's fortress, because at this point, we're just starting off, he's the headstrong hero. Next scene, we have Dot calling Fong, and it basically confirms that Bob did not talk to them before going off. He just went off on his own. And Dot realizes this, and later we find out that she's taken right off to go help him. We return to Bob and Megabyte, as Bob does a pretty unconvincing, I'm throwing in with the bad guys, totally, totes, I am evil now, yes! As Megabyte shows off his personal army to Bob, A huge bay door opens, revealing what Bob identifies as a tear. And this one is connected to the supercomputer. The favor turns out to be to stabilize the tear and open a portal to the supercomputer, so that Megabyte can spread his infection. As Bob hesitates, Megabyte goes to Plan B, throwing Bob at the tear, forcing him to turn it into a portal to avoid being deleted by the unstable energy field. Before Megabyte can... Megabyte pulls him back and Bob just deactivates it. Before Megabyte can throw Bob in again, Hack and Slash show up with Dot, saying, it's like, oh, she started a riot outside. This distraction gives Bob a moment to knock out the containment field holding Megabyte's tear, and the unstable energy just freaks out, starting to destroy parts of the compound and just wreaking havoc on Megabyte's base as Dot and Bob escape. However, Megabyte is hard on their heels. By sheer coincidence, a GameCube starts descending on Megabyte's headquarters. And one thing that they stated earlier was that two things can stabilize a tear: a Guardian and his glitch, or a game. So, Megabyte's like, well, looks like I don't need you anymore. This will stabilize my tear for me. And as the game descends, we get our first look at the inside of a game. And it looks awesome. We start out with a Robotech-esque shot of an aircraft carrier floating in space. And as the game begins, Megabyte infects the user, apparently taking over the game. It seems like a straightforward kind of space flight shooter. But now that Megabyte's taken over and is heading for the tear, the stakes are raised, and I'm guessing the objective is a bit different. The first level is an asteroid field. Bob and Dot, working together with a squad of sprites, take off in hot pursuit of Megabyte. They lose a ship in the field, and as soon as our heroes get clear of the asteroid field, they see what I'm guessing is level 2, a gunship controlled by Megabyte's followers. They take that out in relatively short order because this is right near the end of the episode, so everything's going really rapid fire. And it's a really great scene, though, because Dot says, I have a shot, Bob covers her, and they work well together. That's one thing that I'm really loving about this show, and as I remember, it is a pretty big theme throughout the show. Dot is pretty much never just a damsel in distress. There's one or two times or more where she does need Bob's help, but she's never the helpless damsel. She just as often pulls his ass out of the fire and saves him. And they never really make a big deal about it. It's just, Dot's helping. And I really love that, especially with how old this show is. It's a good example of a well-made show. None of the characters are forced into a purely stereotypical role, except, Bob's the hero. And it is just really well done. I mean, even in the first episode here, we have our main female lead working on equal ground with our male lead. And both of them just making it, acting like it is completely normal, which it should be. And, after the gunship, they make planetfall and fly into a cave. Dot states this is the 3rd level, which means we're right at the end here. And there is some good tension as Megabyte closes in on his goal. He almost makes it too, but at the last moment, Bob drops into the portal, which ends the game and destabilizes the tear. Just as Megabyte is about to take his rage out on Dot, Bob returns through the portal, using an erase command from the supercomputer's armory to remove the tear, and then a hidden file command to escape Megabyte, making it look like they'd vanished when really all he'd done was make him and Dot invisible. Again, I love the creative ways they incorporate computer stuff into, real computer stuff into computer terms, into this inner world. Then we get a quick wrap-up with Enzo basically saying, yep, he came trashed the place again, but don't worry, he left. And that closes off the very first episode of Reboot. This is an amazing Canadian-produced show, and if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. Anyhow, thank y'all for watching, and I'll see you next time.